I am Dr. Joy Buolamwini, the founder of the Algorithmic Justice League. It is my pleasure to give you an overview of our paper, Who Audits the Auditors? Recommendations from a field scan of the algorithmic auditing ecosystem. This work was done in collaboration with Dr. Sasha Costanza-Chock, Deborah, Raji, and many more. Algorithmic harms abound, from false arrests to patients denied kidney transplants. Given the real-world impact of AI, algorithmic audits, or AI audits, are an increasingly popular mechanism for algorithmic accountability. However, they remain poorly defined. Without a clear understanding of audit practices, they can exacerbate rather than mitigate bias and harm. To address this knowledge gap, we provide the first comprehensive field scan of the AI audit ecosystem. We share a catalog of individuals and organizations who engage in AI audits or whose work is directly relevant to algorithmic auditing. We conduct an anonymous survey of the group with 152 respondents and interview 10 industry leaders. The auditors we interviewed and surveyed had experiences assessing algorithmic systems that touch industry use in social media, employment, consumer goods, insurance, and credit. Some auditors also had experience working for state and local governments. We identified emerging best practices as well as methods and tools. For example, we find that the AI auditors we surveyed were more likely to report engaging in quantitative audit methods than critical, structural, or qualitative ones. 70% engage in quantitative checks. In practice, there's little and limited disclosure and peer review of audit. 82% of auditors surveyed believe that public disclosure of audit results or degree of documentation should be legally mandated. Our study found broad support for regulation, but disagreement on the details. Respondents were split between those who say future regulation should explicitly define what AI audits entail, and those who say regulation should provide standards and guidelines, but not specific definitions. We find that the reporting of algorithmic harms is ad hoc, and that less than half of auditors say AI stakeholder engagement is a key part of an algorithmic audit. We also identify barriers for leveraging these audits as effective accountability mechanisms. One of the biggest barriers for auditors is an overall lack of buy-in from those they audit. Several respondents attributed this lack of buy-in to beliefs that performing audits could bring exposure to legal liability. The second was the cost of auditing. We will end with policy recommendations based on these findings, including, first, both owners and operators of AI systems should be required to engage in independent audits against clearly defined standards. Second, individuals should be notified when they are subject to algorithmic decision-making. Third, disclosure of key components of audit findings for peer review should be mandated. Fourth, auditors should consider real-world harm in their audit processes, including through standardized harm incident reporting and response mechanisms. Fifth, auditors should prioritize stakeholder involvement by affected communities. Sixth, there should be a formalized evaluation process and potentially accreditation of AI auditors. See the full paper at auditors.ajl.org.